And welcome to my YouTube series on how chords are formed and used for absolute beginners. My name is Jerry, and I am so excited to finally launch this series because I felt a strong need and desire for a long time to present music theory concepts in such a way that it makes understanding how chords are formed as easy as possible. And from time to time, I'll have a few guests join me to tell this story. When you finish this series of 8 sessions, you should be able to fully understand the background and origin of how all chords are formed and named, something that eluded me for such a long time. As you can see in this map, I have identified 17 sessions total, but I have concentrated on releasing the first 8 sessions, allowing us to focus on the topics and the information needed in understanding how chords are structured and formed. To get started, let's look at a preview of this series of 8 sessions to be released every 2 weeks beginning late year 2024. Session 1, the Music Theory Journey into Chords. This is the session we are now in. Session 2, Understanding Note Names. This session is all about identifying the 18 names of the keyboard notes and their relationship to one another. With that said, if you ask your best piano playing friend to name these 18 note names, I bet they will say that is not correct, but it is. This is one session and one reason why you need this series of learning sessions. Session 3, Understanding Note Intervals. This session identifies the fundamentals of what allows us to hear what we hear, including the all-important terms minor third and major third note intervals. It also includes an introduction of semitone note counting, which will also be covered as a standalone topic in Session 5. And lastly, you will learn the naming languages used for classifying note intervals. In Session 4, Understanding Note Position Numbers, this may be the most essential session in understanding how chords are formed. Without a working knowledge of note position numbers, the absolute beginner will be left with learning chords by memorization alone, a very shallow strategy for advancing your chord making skills. In Session 5, Understanding Semitone Count Numbers, this session uncovers a somewhat hidden gem as an alternative note counting method which will make you look like a pro musician by allowing you to form chords quickly and accurately in any key signature every time. Session number 6, Understanding Chord Formulas. This explains what chord formulas are, how they are used, and where to find them. Without chord formulas, you will find yourself guessing and/or, quote, pecking around the keyboard by trial and error to find correct chord notes, which are not good options. Session 7, Understanding Chord Types. This session is dedicated to identifying how chord types are organized and grouped into logical arrangements for forming chords without having to use typical chord charts. Chord charts mostly show only finger positions and/or note names, but not how the chords are actually derived. Session 8, Understanding Chord Names. It combines the information learned from the previous 7 sessions to make sense of how chords are named. And conversely, this same information can be used to analyze and decode chords to identify their origin. So there is the lineup for this series. And I do believe that if you completely understand all of the information I present in these sessions, you will be well ahead of the most average amateur musician. And now, a word about the art and science of music. Music and music theory in and of itself represent some level of interpretation of what musicians and listeners hear and feel, including whether they like or dislike the sound, or whether something heard is right or wrong, or whether something is good or bad. These qualities of music are in the ear of the beholder. This is the art part of music. And many musicians summarize the sounds and feelings of music by saying, if you like it, then it's good, justifying that music theory is not required. But for my 8 sessions, I am mostly presenting the science part of music, understanding the common rules and protocol of music theory fundamentals, including notes, note intervals, note position numbers, chord types, chord formulas, and chord name analysis. The science of music is why, technically speaking, playing music is not based upon random orders of things, whether the artist or performer knows it or not. There is an orderly way that music is developed. Let's get this introductory session started by taking a look at who these sessions are designed for. Regardless of your age, if you're an absolute beginner to music and the piano, meaning absolutely no musical background, but believe you might enjoy learning chords to play basic songs, you are in the right place. If you are an absolute beginner to the piano and music and do not have the desire or time to invest in many years of study, you are also in the right place. And if you are an absolute beginner to the piano and music and have no desire, at least at the moment, to become a classical pianist, you are in the right place. Lastly, if you are already a piano or even a guitar player at any level, but never had the opportunity to learn basic theory to make sense of how things work in music, especially chords, you too are in the right place. Or if you have particular gaps in understanding basic theory concepts, I suspect you would still have some wow, I didn't know that moments along the way in my sessions. So at this time, please assure yourself that if you relate to any of the points above, then you do qualify as the perfect learning candidate for these sessions, especially as an absolute beginner. And while we're at it, let me also share who is not included in my target audience so as to clarify and be transparent about my sessions. My sessions do not include advanced levels of music theory that music educators and professionals might study. My sessions may or may not provide meaningful content to an audience considered as unusually gifted or unusually talented. These special students are for professionals, although the content I present is technically correct, useful, and should still be beneficial. My sessions may not include helpful content to persons who have had previous music education experience in specialized topics such as vocal or ear training, reading sheet music, understanding lead sheets, chord progression formulas, or transposing music. And my sessions are not intended to persuade you on how much learning music fundamentals will make you a better musician, as that is something you must decide either on your own or develop a trust, in this case with me. Now, let me share a few points on the format of these sessions. First, I intentionally present my sessions at a slower pace and use simple and direct wording, not to dumb down information, but to allow you to understand and learn without feeling like there is a timer being watched. In other words, I will not talk quickly just to cram in information, and I will intentionally repeat important concepts and terms that I think are important to know. Secondly, to further enhance your learning journey, I never assume you know music terms or definitions. So when I introduce them, I will either give you a full definition or example at that moment, or at a minimum, give you an abbreviated definition sufficient to make sense, until which time I can give you a more thorough explanation in a more appropriate context. For example, in this session, I have already mentioned the term chord many times. In fact, it is one of the words in the title of these sessions. So let me define the term chord, as it will be used many times throughout these sessions. A chord is the sound or tone that's created by playing multiple notes at the same time on instruments that can do that, like pianos and guitars, as opposed to many other musical instruments that can only be played one note at a time, such as a saxophone, trombone, or clarinet. So if you learn how to form and play chords, you are well on your way to being able to enjoy some of your favorite songs. So the essence of these sessions is to learn everything we can about chords and how to use them, since they are the backdrop sound of all songs. Third, my sessions are very carefully sequenced, meaning each session should be consumed in the session number sequence as presented to fully grasp and understand those concepts before continuing to the next. Although you may be tempted to jump ahead because of the session titles, please be very careful that you don't assume or miss critical learning points by skipping sessions you believe you already know. Skipping around is what creates much of the confusion in learning music theory, since important information may get left out, leaving a void in making sense of it all. And lastly, I would never want you to believe or misinterpret that my sessions are presented with an attitude that they are the perfect and only solution on any subject or topic. I am a very humble teacher and understand that there are many paths to learning. But I'm also equally confident that the information and methods I use assist in your learning process and can be successfully applied as instructed. Now, a bit about my goals and objectives for presenting this series of sessions. My primary goal is to teach you specifically about forming chords from the perspective of an average amateur musician using the piano as the instrument of choice. Translated, if you enjoy learning new skills without taking years to develop competency, I am confident you can achieve basic chord playability in a reasonable amount of time. The overall objective of this series of topics is to share things I learned that I wished I had have known early in my own musical theory development. Had I known early on what I now know, I might have developed into an above-average keyboardist. Despite my limitations of never taking piano lessons, nor having gifted hand independence, or not having great pitch hearing, I have had the experience of enjoying several decades of playing keyboards in rock bands and would be honored to help you cut through the maze of information and misinformation to become a better musician much faster. And now, a word about learning challenges for these sessions. Know that my learning sessions do require some investment of time on your part, but only because there are several topics that must be understood before things start making sense, but not because any one of the topics are overly complicated. This is why understanding the music theory puzzle pieces will make things sensible and repeatable. And without being negative, know that there is some amount of music theory misinformation out there on the internet, making it hard to know what's correct, what's incomplete, or examples being used that make issues even more confusing. And unfortunately, much of this information continues to be passed down from generation to generation. So, along your journey and our journey together, I will help you identify and clarify those misguided and misaligned pieces of information. And my experience indicates many veteran amateur musicians who have not studied music theory have convinced themselves they already, quote, know it all, or know, quote, enough to get by. These are the musicians whose personal commitment stops short of taking the time to fully understand theory. They most often only learn parcels of some theory topic and then try to apply that with another parcel of theory and then wonder why it all doesn't make sense. Please don't be that person. But let's be sure you know what music theory is, since I have used the term several times thus far. Although there could be tons of words to use to describe this term, I am electing to define it from a big picture perspective. So here goes. Music theory is a very broad subject that encompasses a wide variety of topics related to writing music, reading music, and/or playing music. Within each of these broad topics, they contain many musical terms, concepts, and languages that must be sorted through to get going. Writing music is the art of putting words and lyrics and musical phrases together to form a song. Reading music is the learned skill of taking sheet music and reading individual notes while simultaneously playing them on some instrument. And playing music is the skill of playing notes and/or chords to a song of choice, whether you can formally read sheet music or not. The range of skills it takes to actually play music varies greatly but can be enjoyed by many. Because these topics are so broad, most amateur musicians are probably not an expert in all of them. For example, there are lots of songwriters that are not great players, lots of music readers that are not great players, lots of players who are not great songwriters, and lots of players that can't read music. The point is that you can be skilled in one without being skilled in the others. But you can become knowledgeable and proficient about music theory, which gives you a great overall perspective of all three skills, as well as being helpful as you develop your own skills. Although my sessions are centered on knowledge of music theory and not the mastery of playing techniques, you're the only one that can help develop that skill. From my perspective, understanding music theory should come first, as it is about learning what you are supposed to play, when to play it, and why it is played that way. For understanding the mechanics and skills of how to play the piano and/or guitar, there are countless presentations out there designed to help you. Inevitably, as you progress in your musical journey, you will be involved in music theory discussions amongst other musicians who may repeat partials of what they heard in their own and perhaps misunderstood version, and may again repeat that same information in another distorted version, all while assuming its correctness. After all, who's going to challenge the music theory discussion leader, who is probably considered the best musician in the group? But without someone's fact-checking and confirming the information at hand, these discussions can become a never-ending cycle of perpetuating incomplete and/or inaccurate information, often concluding with statements such as, quote, "that's an exception," or "it doesn't matter," just to end the conversation without resolve and move on. Even worse, ending a musician debate in total frustration and/or hurt feelings is perhaps the perfect indicator of music theory confusion by everyone. Whether we like it or not, basic music theory is based upon exactness and repetitiveness and can be explained without exceptions if you truly understand the concepts. So be suspicious of yourself and others until you can confirm from reliable sources that the music theory information being discussed amongst you and your musician friends is accurate and correct. Otherwise, you might be the very one aiding and contributing to the already vast amount of music theory misinformation. To summarize, the intent of this introductory session, the music theory journey into chords, is to give you an overview of what music theory fundamentals are about before just jumping in. But my ultimate goal after completing sessions 2 through 8 is to help you learn how and why to form and play chords much sooner than perhaps the traditional and classical teaching methods of learning to read sheet music first, which take some people years to become fluent. And now, a look ahead to Session 2 and beyond. As mentioned earlier in this introduction, we are now ready to start our technical journey of music theory into the specific session topics. But I want to remind you again that these sessions are presented in a very deliberate sequence to maximize your learning experience. If you start skipping sessions, you're likely to miss important details that may make future topics more difficult to understand. And last but not least, I want to thank my bride Karen for her support in this project, as well as a special friend, musician, and guest, Mike Furlong, for his vast guitar knowledge, expertise, and feedback for this project. And I also want to thank you for your time and attention. And now I'll see you in session 2.